Welcome to Amanda Hall's Psychic Mini Workshop Series here on Facebook Live. We're up to week number 64, Workshop 64, how the time flies. For those of you that join me regularly on a weekly basis, you'll know each week we talk about some sort of astrological sort of energy that's going on. We also cover the full moons and the new moons each month, and then we fill the gaps in and the sun sign of the month too, but we fill the gaps in with other psychic subjects in between. So this week I'm happy to talk about the full moon in Scorpio. So before we kick the show off this week, let's get some T's and C's out of the road. My name's Amanda Hall Psychic. I've been in the psychic industry here in Australia for over 40 years. I've won a number of awards for my dedication to the psychic industry, including Psychic Hall of Fame in 2013. I've won Psychic of the Year 6 or 7 years in a row now. I'm starting to lose count. It's been so amazing, and I want to thank everybody that voted for me for that, because that's the public that votes for that award. But more importantly, it's you that's important to us. It's the audience that we attract week after week from around the world, where everybody comes together and joins in this little 15, 20 minute, sometimes 25-minute presentation, where we discuss some of the things that are happening in the world. We look at where the moon might be for the week. This week we're going to be working with the full moon in Scorpio. And I don't like to give shout outs during the presentation. I'm happy to sort of see all the little hearts and thumbs up symbols going across the screen, but I like to try and keep the presentation seamless. If I start giving shout outs, I'll lose where my place is and what we need to talk about. So please know that you are all important. If you want to leave your name in the comments box and say hi and where you're from and how your day's been or what the weather's like or how you're enjoying the lead up to the full moon, I'm happy to sort of reply to you in the next couple of days. I will not answer any questions other than relating to the topic at hand of this week's workshop. I do not give away free readings on this workshop. If you want the opportunity to get a free reading with me, can I suggest to you that you join my previous show here on Facebook over at A1R Psychic Radio on half an hour before this presentation. So whatever time of the world it is now where you are, if you're watching this live, it's half an hour before this. If you're in America, it is actually 5 p.m. Eastern time over there. The Washington district, it's 5 p.m. that I'm actually on air with A1R Psychic Radio. Here in Australia, it's 7 o'clock in the morning here on the Gold Coast, so that the show actually starts. So we've got those things out of the road. So let's start with the full moon in Scorpio. Now, look, the full moon, anytime we have a full moon, and we have one once a month, sometimes very occasionally we have a second one in the calendar month, but the full moon is a time when the moon in the sky is at its fullest. It sort of sometimes can look happy, sometimes it looks sad, sometimes it looks sort of in between those sort of things. But it's a time where a lot of people sort of say to me, oh, Amanda, I really feel the effects of the full moon. I can't sleep, I get twitchy, I get emotional, I get cranky. Some people say to me, I reach for the chocolates. There's not enough chocolate in the world around the time of a full moon. I just don't want to talk to anybody. I want to be in my own thoughts. Nobody can please me. You know, I want to feel love and emotion and affection and all those sort of things. And then when my partner comes near me, I want to tell him to nick off, leave me alone. What are you doing that for? What are you annoying me? And it's sort of like we send very mixed signals about our emotional needs at the time of a full moon. Now, as the moon actually changes star signs each time too, it gives us a different flavour, I suppose, of what the full moon is going to be each month. And how do we know where the full moon's going to be each month? Well, the full moon is always directly opposite the sun sign. So we're in the sun sign of Taurus at the moment. So if we count 6 signs past the Taurian energy, we know that that brings us to Scorpio. So when the sun is in Taurus, the full moon is in Scorpio. The new moon would be in the same sign as the sun sign. So this is how we just know what full moon is coming up. So the full moon doesn't randomly turn up in a sign every month differently. It follows these patterns all the way around the zodiac year after year, so that we always sort of know when we're expecting the most uncomfortable or the most pleasant full moons, because we know by the sun sign energy what full moon is coming towards us. So this month we've got the full moon in Scorpio. Now, for those of you that are regular viewers of my workshops and know of my teachings over the many years, you'll know that I always say this is the most difficult full moon of the 12-month calendar. No, it is not where the moon governs this particular sign. It's where the moon feels very intense. Now, we're talking about the full moon in Scorpio. Now, anytime we deal with any planet or any luminary sitting in Scorpio, we always magnify the energy, because the Scorpio energy is about very intense, deep emotional energy. So when you couple that energy with the moon energy, then we have a very, very, very super intense full moon. Now, it doesn't always have to be seen on a negative, but I'm going to describe to you the deeper side of the moon, or the little bit more of the negative side of the moon, if you want to put it that way first. Now, when we are approaching a full moon in Scorpio, this is the time when anything on an emotional level will become exaggerated. It will certainly become very heightened. Now, for many of us, this will be a time to be disregarding whatever your star sign is. You can be a fire sign, an earth sign, an air sign, or a water sign. You will all have some effect of this full moon. So what it means is that we will start to feel a little bit uncomfortable. We'll start to feel the tension rising in our body, things that sort of normally we would sort of shrug off and it wouldn't really bother us. And I'll give you an example. Like this morning when I went to get ready for my shows, I went to write the information up on my board so that I can read it when I'm on camera. And the two whiteboard markers I'd bought only a couple of days ago were both dry. I'd used one the other day and they were perfectly fine. Today they had no ink in them. So I went into a tailspin about that. Now that might sound ridiculous to someone else. Why would you go into a tailspin over a whiteboard marker? But when it interferes with your day-to-day routine and you've got a certain amount of time to accomplish those sort of tasks, that can be enough to set you off. That can be enough to disrupt your emotional balance. Now, normally that sort of thing wouldn't bother me. I'd think, oh, well, I'll just, maneuver around that, get a big piece of paper and write it on in biro or a normal texter or something and just clip it onto the board so that I can still read it. But this morning, for whatever reason, that logical way to fix a problem didn't come into my head. It was sort of meltdown sort of time, blasted, whiteboard markers and a few choice words. And then I sort of like, when I thought, no, calm down, breathe, there's got to be a solution here. Then I remembered I had a couple of other whiteboard markers. I just had to find them. So you see what I mean? Where something like that normally that wouldn't bother you becomes a major issue. You have to ask yourself why. And it's because we're heading into this full moon. So that now has just alerted me to know over the next week or so that I'm going to have to be more aware of that. I'm very, very super sensitive to this full moon, more than I normally am under full moons in Scorpios. That maybe that there's something else that's going on in my chart that I need to explore and understand why everything seems to be over amplified and not just the full moon. So the full moon in Scorpio means this to each and every one of us. Most of us will have issues with trying to sleep or staying asleep, that we feel uncomfortable, we feel tired, we feel titchy, we sort of, one minute we're happy, the next minute we're not so happy. People are going to annoy us, people are going to get on our nerves, people won't necessarily be listening to conversations, and if they are, they give you a stupid or a dumb answer or not the answer that you wanted, and you'll get frustrated with them. So you're going to have to be very, very careful not to sort of react to things like this because somebody hasn't behaved or given you an answer in the way that you wanted it or delivered it the way that is appropriate for you. As long as they've given you the information and they haven't yelled and screamed at you, then just be very gracious and accept the information that's being shared with you. And try and be a little bit more understanding that other people are having a not so good time as well. Maybe they're feeling their nerves are a little bit frazzled. Maybe they're feeling a little bit under the weather. Maybe they're not feeling as if they're coping with the world in the best way that they can. I think it's really interesting when we get to a full moon like this, that anybody that has any sort of emotional illness or people that don't cope with stress as well as the rest of the population will find this is very heightened at this time. So anybody that might, not like being in crowds, say for argument's sake, will really struggle with forcing themselves out the door to go and do the weekly grocery shop, or needing to go to a medical appointment or something like that. They could really feel their anxiety ramp up and not understand why. Thought that they were doing really, really well, and then all of a sudden, like the flick of a light switch, their anxiety is through the roof. and they sort of, you know, they're really questioning then what has changed, what am I doing, why is this not happening for me the way that it should. And it's like when you understand the cycles of the moon and you work with it, then you can learn to book your appointments in around it, that it won't necessarily add extra anxiety to your life. If you're somebody that suffers with anxiety and not wanting to go out in public, and you know that this particular full moon's coming up, then you would then avoid booking an appointment during that 7-day cycle. You would book it either prior to it or after it, so you're minimizing the extra anxiety that would be placed on you. Then you could stay home in the comfort of your own home where you feel safe and secure and less inclined to have anxiety. You'll be able to deal with things a lot more. Now, the intensity of the full moon is very powerful at this time. Now, for a lot of people, somebody keeps tickling me this morning, but I'm sure that's coming from the other side. The intensity of the full moon this time is about dragging up stuff from the past. It's like everything's going to come to the surface. Things that we thought we dealt with, but we haven't, are going to rise to the surface and say, okay, you now have to look at this. It's in your face. You cannot ignore it. You can't just push it to one side or push it to that side. You're going to have to deal with it. And for a lot of us, that seems quite painful. That why would we have to deal with something that we thought we dealt with and we'd released or put away or whatever a long time ago. But a lot of times when we think we've dealt with something and we've released it, what we've done is we've moved it from here to there. We haven't actually let go of it. We're still holding on to it for some strange reason. We've just moved it. It's like we've moved it from one location to another. And this is the time where it will come back and it sits in your face until you do look at it. Sometimes we look at things that we thought was such a major issue in our lives, and when it comes back for us to look at it at a time like this, we think, what on earth why did I get so upset about that? It's not really that bad. It's sort of crumbled, or it's not as important as it was when I put it to one side. And sometimes that's all it needs to be looked at, and in that way we can release it and we can move on. For a lot of other people, it's like it's a time when they really look at themselves almost naked and see all their faults and all their warts and everything else and say, I don't like what I'm seeing. Well, this is the perfect time then to start to put a plan of action together that says how I can deal with the things that I don't like about myself or the things that are causing me stress. I can start to formulate a plan of action to move forward with this. On the positive side of the full moon in Scorpio, it gives us the power to resolve issues, to resolve those emotional things that have really troubled us, that have, brought us down in life or stopped us reaching our full potential. It's also the time when we can be incredibly bluntly honest with ourselves about what we like and dislike about ourselves. So there's always a positive and a negative to everything. But because this is such an intense full moon, anything or any reaction that you have to any other full moon, magnify this by at least 10 times, if not more. This one will be powerful. This one will be intense. This is not the time to have the deep and meaningful conversation with your partner about all their faults, because all you're going to do is get their back up. They're going to sort of turn around and give you a mouthful of all your faults as well. And then we're likely to create World War 55. And that's the last thing that we want to do in a relationship or a family situation. It's not the time to bring the family argument up and we're all going to sit around and have the round table conference, because the round table conference is probably going to end up in a fisticuffs fight and nothing will be resolved and people will end up, worse off than what they were before. So this is a time of confronting ourselves, not necessarily confronting issues or other people, but confronting ourselves with the issues that are around us. So if you can look at it in that way, you will understand the full moon and its energy so much better. It's a time when I think that we really need to sort of really ask ourselves, what are the things that we need to confront about ourselves personally, and start to look at it. So I always like to work with candles, and it's something I've worked with most of my psychic career. And a few years ago now, I created a psychic candle range, including the moon energy, and to help people sort of change their intent, purpose, and direction in their lives. And the full moon candle was one of the first ones that we designed, because I feel that the full moon energy is so important that we all need to work with it. So how I like to work with my full moon energy with my full moon candle is this. The full moon is on the 19th of May or May 19, depending on what part of the world you're in. So I always start working with the full moon energy 2 days prior to the full moon. So that will be the 17th and the 18th. Then the full moon is the 19th, 20th, 21st. And then I allow 2 days on the decline of the 22nd and the 27th. So that's a full 7-day cycle. I like to write 3 things minimum, if I can, on my piece of paper that I wish to release with the full moon. Now, that can be many, many things. It could be things that have been troubling you. It could be things that you feel that it's time for those negative emotions or those thought patterns to be released. It could be releasing a car. You know, you've caused me a lot of stress because you keep breaking down, so I'm going to release you and buy a new one. It doesn't always have to be just a straight out emotional situation, but it can be things that are outworn that we want to sort of release. And I think there isn't a person on the planet that can't say that they haven't had a feud or an argument or a disagreement with somebody at some stage or another in their life that has lingered and stayed with them, even if they've decided to close the door on that friendship or that situation, but the emotion is still there and it gets buried. Well, it may come to the surface under this, or you might decide it's time for it to come to the surface and release it. So that could be something that you could put on your list. I also like to have possibly another 3 potential things in readiness that I might be slowly starting to work on. And for me, I'm slowly trying to learn to work with the fact that I can still get stressed out over things that, I didn't realize until the last couple of weeks that of course, as we get older, we have less coping mechanisms, but I thought that I had learnt over the years to be able to deal with anything that life threw at me in a way that it didn't put stress in my body, that it wouldn't affect me the same way as it did when I was younger, because hopefully I'd learnt to work on it and work with the energy over the years. But in the last couple of weeks, as I've had a couple of things that have cropped up in my life, nothing too major, but things that other people probably would say, well, why would you get stressed over that? But they became really stressful to me. And it was because I suppose that I wasn't in control of the situation. And the more I tried to take control, the more I was at the mercy of other people and their decisions, their choices, or their incompetence. And it didn't seem to matter how nice I was to them or how I suggested or cajoled them or whatever. They still seemed to have the upper hand or the control. And that was really putting a ridiculous amount of stress in my body. And I thought, this is really strange. After all, it's only this. Why would you allow yourself to get so stressed out to the point that I could really feel my body tensing up, like going really tight, like a stiff piece of concrete, and going from a marshmallow to a piece of concrete in a matter of seconds. And I thought, this can't be doing my body any good. I have to find other ways to not allow this to affect me like that. The other conclusion I came to is maybe now I'm just more aware. Maybe this is the way I've always been all my life, but I just was never aware of it. I never realized. And then I thought, well, if this is the case, no wonder then we bring on illnesses into ourselves, or bring on stiffness or aches and pains or whatever, because we put this ridiculous amount of stress into our bodies without realizing it. We need to find other ways to cope with it. So that's one of the things that's going on my list, is to learn how to release stress and not allow it to affect my physical body to the point where I can feel everything tightening up like a piece of concrete. So working with a full moon candle, we write our little list. We go to read it out aloud before we burn the candle. So I like to burn my candles from 15 minutes to 2 hours per day for the 7-day cycle. So you write your list out, read it out aloud, pop it underneath your candle, pop your candle on a coaster, never putting it directly on furniture, underneath fans, air conditioners, near children and pets. So I burn the candle for 15 minutes to 2 hours per day. I like to work with looking into the flame when I'm burning the candle. I then also write an identical list, and I burn my water sign candle or my Scorpio candle, because the full moon's in Scorpio as well. So I like to burn those two again for the 15 minutes to 2 hours. I write an identical list, read it out aloud, sit there, and I alternate my eyes between one candle to the other when I'm burning two like that. And I use that time as my meditation time. So for those of you that don't have a big area or don't want to work with a big candle, you can make up a little gift box like this of our mini candles. These will burn for up to about 15 hours. This week I've made it up with 2 water signs and a full moon candle. But you can make it up with any out of the 28 candles in our range. There's something there for everybody. For those of you that mightn't want to work with the candle energy or say to me, Amanda, I've got little children and I can't work with a flame, you can still buy the candle and you can purchase one of these melt warmers from your supermarket or department store. And what I do is I take, at the beginning of the cycle, I take 1 teaspoon of full moon wax and I take 1 teaspoon of the water sign wax and I use that. Same principle, write your list out, read it out loud, pop it under the melt warmer. These are electric. You can leave these safely going all day. They're great, and just spend 15 minutes with it and then turn it off at the end of the day. Then I add half a teaspoon a day after that. What that does is it intensifies how we're going to work with the full moon, what we're going to be releasing, what we're going to be working on. And, you know, this working on doesn't need to be all sorted out in the next week or the next month. It might take 12 months. It might take 2 years for us to finally release some of these things that have been troubling us. So I want you to start sort of trying to work with candle energy. Even if you don't have my candles and you have candles around the house, I want you to just work with those. Grab any sort of candle, shut your eyes and imagine you're infusing it with that particular energy. Now, the difference with working with mine, each one of these candles has a particular fragrance that relates to the energy that we're working in, and it's got the intent, purpose and direction infused into the candle when they're made. But if you've got a cupboard full of candles, I suggest you work with those first. I'm a firm believer in using the resources that we have. And there's been many times in my life where I didn't have enough money to buy a fancy candle, and I've just used a household grade candle that you have for a blackout. And I'd hold it in my hand and infuse it with that energy as well. So that just gives you a few suggestions. So because we've got the full moon in Scorpio, and it's a very intense time of the year, but we also have a number of planets sitting in Taurus too. So we've got this real sort of stability, stabilizing energy, but it's also slowed things down quite drastically too. So this is partly where the frustration might be coming into people's lives, where we've seems to feel like everything's on the slow boat from China, nothing's moving fast enough, and this in itself is causing frustration. So maybe it's just a little bit of a message universally, no matter what your sign is. Slow down, take a deep breath, exhale, and sort of say to yourself, well, okay, if I'm not in control of this, then I just have to be patient and work with it. And I know that's hard. I know patience is a dirty 4-letter swear word for most of us, but it is the time I think that we all need to work and understand what patience is about. So next week on the show, I'm really excited to talk about, we're going to be doing one of my favorite workshops, and I know it'll be one of your favorite workshops too. We're going to be working with the candle of wealth. So what does wealth mean to you? Is it money? Is it wealth in other ways? Until next week, have an absolutely sensational week. And I can't end the show without sort of giving some sort of accolade to the beautiful Doris Day, who passed away yesterday at the age of 97. And you know, for those of you that are old enough like me that remember Doris Day, and she had a beautiful voice, she had a beautiful singing voice, she looked like an angel, she is an angel, and she epitomized everything about elegance and style and being a very refined lady. But I think probably one of her most popular or most famous songs that always comes to mind for me when I think of Doris Day, and that is Que Sera, Sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future is not ours to see. Que sera, sera. And I think that's a very fitting song to lead that was ever written. And in some strange way, I think it has a very spiritual meaning. So until next week, bye for now and have a great week. Bye.